Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on this fast forward planet, which is human heated, as anyone who lives in big chunks of North America, Europe, or China understands, or if you're watching the headlines. It's wrapped in an infodemic, as you probably understand, coming out of 3 years of the pandemic. And it's also in turmoil because of Putin's war on Ukraine. There's a lot going on. I'm Andy Revkin. This is the Sustain What webcast. I've left Columbia University. I'm now out here on my own as an independent journalist, 40 years in. But I'm not going to stop doing these conversations. And I'm really happy today to be able to focus on an issue that pops up all over the world. Increasingly, humans are living in places where predators are resurgent, where we had wiped them out for one reason or another, whether it's tigers in the Sundarbans or the alligators in Florida, or here in this case, seals in Cape Cod. I learned through this film, I hadn't realized that the bounty on seals lasted until the 1960s here in Maine, where I am, and in Massachusetts. And of course, with the return of seals comes the return of one of the world's great predators, the white shark. And today we're going to show a clip from the new HBO film by Ivy Meeropol, who until a year ago was a neighbor of mine in the Hudson River Valley, a great filmmaker. We'll talk a little bit about your other work, who has literally dived in on in a nuanced way, a very rare thing when talking about predators, with a portrait of a community struggling with how to deal with abundant predators when you have abundant recreation and other activities that rely on the water. How do we share our landscapes with quote unquote nature? How do we do this sustainably? And Megan Winton, who is at the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, has a new paper out on this very issue. So Ivy Meeropol is here from out in Truro, and Alec Wilkinson, who's a longtime New Yorker writer. I think you joined the New Yorker right around the time I decided to be a journalist, 1981, 80. I think it was 80. It was 1980?
80.
Yeah. I went to journalism graduate school in 81, and here we are 40 plus years later. I thought we'd start. Yeah, and you're also in the Cape, right?
No, I'm actually outside New York City.
Okay.
But I will be on the Cape next week.
All right. Well, let's just show a clip from the film as a starter here. Again, Ivy, great work. It's really hard to tell complex stories, and you've done it. So hold on while I hit play. Hopefully the sound will be correct.
About 9:30, I was by myself on the beach. There was 2 people in the water already. I heard screaming, and I saw the blood.
It seemed like more and more sharks were arriving at Cape Cod each year, but not until the poor boy was killed did it really seem like, okay, now they're here.
It's never quite been the same since the fatal attack. It did cause a rift in the community.
This was a beautiful young man who lost his life because we've been sitting doing nothing.
Violence can intersect any moment, but one wouldn't have thought of the sunny afternoon off the coast of New England. A shadow was waiting.
It's easy to get caught up in the jaws angle to things.
It was like this thing around.
And take our eye off the bigger picture.
The research we're doing is really to learn more about these animals so that we can prevent a bad interaction with a shark.
Yeah!
Sharks, they're attracted by the seals, and there are a lot of seals.
Because of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. You can't touch them, you can't look at them, you can't even yell at them as you go past them.
But there's something else going on down there. The water's warm, so everything's marching north.
Human activities have imbalanced the ecosystem.
We have a problem here, ladies and gentlemen, and the problem is man-made.
We like to think that our lives are orderly, but we don't find cooperation from the natural world.
Did you see that? A fin. Some of these people are acting like the ocean's their little playground. No, it doesn't work that way.
We're right in the damn swimming area.
The marine balance equation means humans are part of the equation.
Finding that balance is not easy.
Humankind must learn humility in the face of nature.
Pretty remarkable. So again, congratulations. This is and this is sort of a breaking story still. This has been an emergent reality on the Cape and elsewhere, even here in Maine, in southern Maine. There's been a couple of attacks, and there was a fatality. And let's start with the filmmaker, just a little bit on Ivy. You've done films on everything from, well, the Rosenberg's execution to Roy Cohn to the complexities around Indian Point nuclear power plant, where the plant right down the river from where you and I, where I used to live and you live. And what drew you to sharks, which, we got Shark Week and all this other stuff. Why sharks? Why Cape Cod?
Well, I have to say, I wasn't really smart enough to just be thinking, oh, I'm going to make a film about sharks because that is going to be what everyone wants to see. Although that is turning out to be quite true. We've tapped into, something that obviously people are just fascinated by sharks. So it's gratifying that, we are being programmed during Shark Week when we're not quite the same, in the same, school, I guess. But I grew up coming to Cape Cod. I've spent a lot of time here. I would spend time in Wellfleet. My parents had very good friends. So every summer it was like the magical week, just 1 week we got to go stay with people. And Alec knows the beaches of Wellfleet well as well. And we would spend time at LeCount Hollow. Anyway, in 1997, my parents were able to buy a house. We're fortunate to buy a house in Truro. And I just started spending a lot of time here. In between work, I worked in politics for a while, and then I wanted to get more creative work. So I would just camp out here and got to know a lot of people. And so it really is like a second home to me. And I was also filming the Roy Cohn film in Provincetown because that's where he could go be more open about his sexuality. And so there was a component of that film that was drawing me to the Cape even more. And I just started, paying attention. If you're out here long enough, you know that the seals were showing up more, and that people were starting to talk about sharks. And in 2012, the first incident, kind of shook everybody. And then as the film shows, in 2018, there was in September that year, someone was bit and survived. And then the unfortunate tragedy with Arthur Medici's death. So I was aware of that things were changing in the environment, but what made me want to make a film about it was the community's reaction at first. And this was pre-pandemic. So it was, there was a lot, it felt like a real life Jaws where everyone was, a lot of people were so upset with the sharks and the seals and worried that that they would be the downfall of this thriving, carefree beach community.
Right. And here's just an image of a shark off of Eastham. That's a National Park Service picture, and I think this was that early incident, if I'm got this right.
Yes, that was the 2012 incident.
Yeah. Alec, you're a journalist. Again, you've been writing about all manner of things for decades. You wrote about this issue in 2021 in The New Yorker. I'll show an image of that in a minute. What got you focused on sharks?
Well, when I was growing up on Cape Cod, my father always used to say, and everybody used to say, there can't be sharks in the water off the Cape because the water's too cold. One day when I was about 10, maybe, there had been a hurricane that washed a shark ashore. And one of the couple of people my brother knew tried to drag it over to Gull Pond, to put it in the water there. They wanted to scare the tourists with it. I was just aware that they were returning. Of course, the sharks appear, they're called man-eaters. They appear in Thoreau's Cape Cod. So they've been there a long time. And then I got involved. I don't know what year I wrote about this, 2018, 2019, I spent 11 days on that boat with Greg Scommel ocean something thing called, when they were trying to catch sharks, and that had been the thing that that experience had got me engaged. I was just engaged, interested as Ivy was in the idea that these things were returning in apparently increasing numbers every year. I mean, they that Search, that boat was called. They chummed and spent 11 days fishing off of Chatham, where these animals were supposed to be rife, and they only caught 2 in all that time. You know, I was supposed to go on the boat for one day and then see a shark caught and go home and write about it. And I ended up, it turned into 11 days. But now, Greg and I guess Megan, I mean, they've tagged, Greg Scommel, that is, have tagged hundreds of these animals. And they are as if schooling around. I mean, I think it's also very interesting that the killer whales are beginning to show up off New England. That's very bad news for the sharks.
Yes.
Killer whales are very picky eaters, though. So we've had
videos of those. The killer whales just killing sharks for fun.
Oh yeah, they do that in South Africa, California, as well. But there's marine mammals are so interesting. There's whale culture. And what's interesting about what's happening off of South Africa is it's 2 orcas that figured it out, and they're now teaching the other orcas how to do it. And they're not only targeting white sharks, they're targeting a lot of other shark species. But the orcas here, at least for now, don't appear to have any interest. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? It's something we're definitely
there's only 3 or 4
tabs on.
Yeah. Well, this is a good transition to Megan Winton, the biologist here at Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. I'm showing an image here of a stamp created for one of my childhood heroes when I was in my teens. I wanted to be a marine biologist, mainly because of Jacques Cousteau and because of Eugenie Clark. I'd read this Lady of the Shark, and but at the same time, you know, I grew up in Rhode Island on the water, and I went to see my grandparents in Florida. And there's something about water predators that's really weird. And when I was around 14, also, I was swimming off the beach in Florida, just like daydreaming, you know, snorkeling, you know that feeling. I'm sure, Megan, you've been there 1,000 times, where you're just hovering, and I'm looking at my shadow on the sand below me, and there's a shadow next to my shadow. It was the same length I was. It was a barracuda. I
love those guys.
I turned to look sideways. Yeah, I know, and I do too. But it was like, oh my God! And then it just like flicked its tail and went away. And so, what? Tell us a little bit about your journey to being a biologist focused on this, and then we'll talk about this new paper and you know, your experience in the film and how you deal with communities. But what got you into this?
Yeah, well, I mean, Eugenie Clark was definitely an inspiration for me early on. But I'm from Florida originally, from Jacksonville, Florida. And my grandparents lived in New Smyrna Beach, which has the distinction of being the shark bite capital of the world.
Oh, interesting.
So growing up, sharks were always kind of in the background on my mind, but I honestly was terrified of them when I was a kid. So I got interested in them. One day I was in the water off of New Smyrna Beach with my sisters, and there was a guy fishing up the beach, and he reeled in a shark. And my sisters and I think I was like 8 or 9, but we all like ran out of the water, like terrified, like how were we not just eaten? There was a shark in the water right next to us. It definitely wasn't a white shark. It was I didn't know what species it was at that point. But it got me curious about these animals. And my mom started getting me books, and I started reading up about them, and I was still afraid of them. But the more and more I read about them, the more fascinated I became with these animals and their biology. And then I realized what a bad rap sharks had. Like, they're really just big fish out there trying to eat their natural food items. But the everything that surrounds them in the popular press and in the media just portrays them as these monsters. And that was brought into stark contrast a couple of years ago. A lobsterman off of Provincetown was swallowed by a humpback whale. And when you read the stories about that and saw the interviews around that, it was always kind of fanciful. Like, can you believe you were lucky enough to be swallowed by a whale? So it just brought that into stark contrast. And that's one thing I really love about your film, Ivy, is that it's so not sensationalized. I mean, it's very real. Like, it describes exactly what's going on here on all sides of the argument, but especially the fact that it came out during Shark Week, when there's so much hyped up rhetoric around sharks out there that oftentimes is being portrayed as like hardcore science.
Yeah.
But it still just feeds into that scary narrative of sharks. So your film really is like a breath of fresh air, as far as I'm concerned. And we've gotten so much. The White Shark catalog is up there now, which we maintain at the Conservancy. So to date, we've identified over 600 individual white sharks. And so many people have come out of the woodwork who I haven't talked to in years, have been texting me, and they've been like, that is so cool that you know individual sharks. And it's helping flip the switch for them, like thinking about these animals' lives and what they have to, do to make it out in the ocean. Like, it's not easy to be a white shark. You live over 70 years if you make it, and the ocean's a really tough place to make it. So having people see those connections and kind of think about these animals out there in the environment and how tough it is to be a shark, how tough it is to be any sort of wild animal is really, helpful to have out there.
Yeah, and there's a sort of a tagline in the film about who's the real predator.
Well, who's the real threat?
The real threat, exactly.
And it's interesting you say that, because at one point when we were coming up with, and we were working with marketing and PR and with HBO, they had written the line, "Who is the real predator?" And that's a perfect example of where I was like, no, we're not saying that, because we're not their prey.
Right.
And I don't ever say that in the film, that we are being hunted by sharks. Nor is it about, so I was like, let's, and every step of the way. And to Megan's point, it's, we are up against this desire to sensationalize, and people are prone to do it and they want to do it. And it was really tricky, especially to tell the whole story of what happened to Arthur Medici without veering into that, and, to do it sensitively, but also you want the audience to feel what it was like. It was horrific, to be here and how everyone felt about it. And so, it was challenging.
That scene in the film, the memorial service was, so
that's actually someone
hard.
Andrew Jacobs' cell phone footage. So we collect, we sought out, because obviously we were shooting this in summer of 2021. Most of the film was shot, so that was a good few years later, and to try to bring feel like you were there, have that visceral experience, we had to go back and find people's footage.
Megan, tell us about the new paper. I think this is just out, right? The last few days.
Yesterday it was published.
Congratulations!
Crazy timing.
I know,
all of this during Shark Week, when all the focus on sharks is at its highest. I was like, really couldn't make this up. So this is a paper that has been in the works for a long time. So essentially, when Cape Cod started to reemerge as this white shark hotspot, it provided the first opportunity for shark scientists in the entire Northwest Atlantic to ever conduct targeted research on the species. They were so rare and so elusive and so widely distributed for so long that all we knew about white sharks really was very opportunistic. We knew where fishermen caught them. We had the opportunity to work them up if fishermen brought them in before they were given protections in the 90s. But they were really a mystery. They were really the most mysterious population on the planet. So when Cape Cod emerged as this new hotspot, Greg Stonewall and John Chisholm, who at that time was at the Division of Marine Fisheries, saw the opportunity, partnered up with the Conservancy, which was like a brand new nonprofit at the time, to conduct the first ever systematic study of the species to try to come up with an estimate of abundance for Cape Cod. And they had to get pretty creative. We had a lot of firsts in this study. I came onto the project in 2015 when I started my PhD. Basically, they knew they needed a nerd. So I do a lot of quantitative fishery statistics work and coding. They were like, you know, we knew each other. Shark world's a small world. And they were like, oh, hey, do you want to work on this? And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is a little shark kid dream come true. But so as you see in the film, we work with a spotter pilot and he flies around, finds sharks, and then we really just sneak up on the shark, which sounds like a crazy thing to do, but we've got a GoPro on a pole and we take underwater video footage, and that's what we use to identify these individuals. And if we look at how many individuals we've seen over time in comparison, you know, to new individuals, we can extrapolate and come up with a population estimate for the time period of that survey. So, but white sharks are really tricky. They move like crazy. They're in and out all the time. Ivy has seen them swimming off the coast in person. They cover so much ground that part of the tricky thing about the study was we had to develop a whole new model to account for that, to make sure our estimates were robust. So we did all that, and at the time that she was shooting the film, we didn't have an estimate yet. We knew we had identified just shy of 400 sharks during that survey, but the math part of it wasn't done yet. So we recently wrapped that up, and we found that over that 4-year survey period, that 800 individual white sharks visited the waters off of Cape Cod, which is really big for us. You know, it means it's a big aggregation site. It's a good thing conservation wise, but it's also the first time we've ever had a number for any portion of the species range in the Northwest Atlantic. So we've got a baseline now that we can use in the future to see, is this population continuing to increase? You know, if you don't know how many are out there, you can't manage them. And it is by far the question we get asked the most often.
And over again, yeah.
Oh, all the time. And so it's really nice to have that work out there. But what we found from that study and the tagging data is there's so much turnover in the population. Some sharks will come here for years, then they'll move northward. They'll spend most of their time in Canada. So we're continuing to monitor the population using different tag types and the same type of ID process. But the system is very, very dynamic. Every year is a little bit different.
So let's talk about the regulatory conundrum.
That's amazing work, Megan. Incredible, though.
Thanks.
Yeah, hear about it.
Yeah.
Is that the largest population you think on the East Coast?
It's definitely on the East Coast. It's the only hot spot here. But when we look at it in comparison to white shark hotspots worldwide, we think it's among the largest of those as well.
It is one of the largest, right?
Yes, yeah.
And what's so interesting, of course, is you have one of the largest white shark populations and also one of the largest recreational populations. It's that overlap.
Yeah, it would be nice if these sharks were aggregating somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, like they do off of Guadalupe Island in Mexico.
Right.
But it's definitely, again, like Ivy said, they're not seeking out humans. They don't prey on humans. They're super cautious, selective predators because the seals fight back and they investigate things. But just the numbers we have here means that people really need to be aware when they're entering the ocean that in the summer and the fall, there is a white shark somewhere. And a lot of times we talk to folks and they're like, oh yeah, but they're far offshore, right? And we're like, no, they hunt for seals right off the beaches. So we conducted a study a few years ago where we found that when white sharks are here, they spend about half their time in water that's 15 feet deep or less because they're actively patrolling the beaches for the seals who know they're out there and stay as tight to the beach as they can.
Wow. So let's talk. Sorry, Alec. Yeah.
Oh, so Megan, I always figure when I see seals, that means the water's safe because the seals wouldn't be around there if they knew the sharks were around. But do you think, I mean, it could be, of course, that the seals have no way. They respond. I mean, when you see some of these seals, obviously, as you say, they fight back. They're too big for the.
Uh-oh, you froze. Or did I freeze?
Oh, but you got his question. Basically, as a swimmer, as a local, are seals? If you see seals, does that mean it's a good thing or a bad thing?
Right.
Alec, your point.
I always feel safe when I see a seal.
Oh, so your point is a really good one in ways, and a bad one in ways. So before the sharks really show up early on in the season, when we're out deploying our equipment, which we do in the spring, the seals are out, they're kind of having a party. And I mean, like, they're offshore. They're out in water that's like 20, 30 feet deep. And they seemingly don't have a care in the world. And we see them act that way until a few sharks, we usually have sharks that are a little early, come in and they start picking those guys off. And then the message gets out there, unless you're a really young, dumb seal who's just not paying attention to what the rest of them are doing. But they have to go in the water to eat. So they will be in the water in the summer and fall, but they stay super tight to the beach.
Right.
And oftentimes the seals don't realize the white sharks are there. The shark strategy, so we've started using drones in our research a lot to kind of document this and get a better idea of nearshore behavior when we're not like following them with a boat right next to them. And what we have seen is a lot of times the seals don't seem aware. They're still watching their depth, but at some point the seals have to go out and eat. So they have to go out in deeper water. And we captured some footage last year that sums this up perfectly. There's schools of, I think they were sand lance, it might have been pogies, I can't remember, swimming a little ways off the beach. The seals were making little jaunts out to this school to snag some fish. And there's a shark right off there in water that's deep enough for the shark. And then at one point, a seal comes out, almost runs smack into the shark. The shark actually didn't even see it. And you can see the seal's thought process. It swims out to get a fish, sees the shark, and it's like, oh crap. Oh, beelines it back to the shore. But the sharks, that's why here, you know, people think about white sharks, they think they're going to be swimming with their dorsal fins out of the surface. Right? They do in all the movies and TV, but they rarely do that here. They're very bottom oriented because seals are super agile. And basically, as soon as a seal keys into the fact that a white shark is going to make its move, the shark isn't going to be successful. They completely rely on stealth and like sneak attacks.
So I'm pointing to Twitter here to get at the issue of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And, you know, seal abundance, your film has that section, Ivy, on the history of clubbing them and the bounties, where I think you got your bounty if you you collected the noses of the seals, and there were thousands and thousands and thousands. They were basically largely wiped out. And through till 1962. Like,
ears and noses.
Yeah. So, and now we have scenes like this one from a drone. And, you know, one of the arguments of the fishermen and the other people in the community is that the Marine Mammal Protection Act has a flaw. And Alec, I know you got into this. The flaw is it was all about restoration, but it doesn't really have an end point. Is that a way to describe the issue?
I didn't. You broke up.
The Marine Mammal Protection Act. You know, it was all about restoration and protection.
Right.
But it doesn't really have an endpoint. The Endangered Species Act has kind of you can delist, but it seems that one of the tensions here is that for seals, now that they're so abundant, there isn't a sort of, okay, we can cross that off, and that's where some of the community concerns come in.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm up there, I kind of, you know, sometimes you'll see like 12 seals go, 10, 12 seals go along. I when I'm up there, I think of them as sea rats. They're just sort of, you know, they foul the water. They're very loud. They're, you know, the water around head of the meadow is just disgusting.
They do stink when you're downwind of them.
I will tell you that when I was interviewing Alec, he also expressed these strong feelings about seals, and I decided, Alec, that I didn't want to do that to you and put that in the film because
yeah. You know, I mean, then every once in a while you see a YouTube video of somebody standing on the beach of Provincetown, the seal gets hit, and you go, "Oh my God, this is just the worst." You know, these are incredible. They're like deer. You know, the deer are where I live,
right.
The parasites and incredible, you know, problem that we have. But you know, see one by the side of the road hit by a car, you sort of think, oh my God, what a beautiful creature. And so I mean, I don't know that there is a solution to because as appears in Ivy's film, the Marine Mammal Protection Act applies to the entire coastline of America. So
Right.
you can't try to solve a problem in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, or Truro, Massachusetts, without also understanding you're affecting the balance of the wildlife in California, or the Gulf of Mexico.
Not to mention the seals that they're coming from Canada, because they've shown
Canadian seals.
If you Canadian seals, but if you there was seal scientists who look at this say if you removed cull, don't use the C word, removed 100,000 seals from that population, they would repopulate themselves,
Right.
just coming down from,
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a wonderful thing when you see these creatures. Sometimes you're seeing a great big creature in the wild, and it's sort of wonderful.
I'm showing it. Yeah, I'm showing an image here in down East Maine. We're way up in Wabanaki territory near Bar Harbor. The seals are still a pleasant little surprise when we go out kayaking. And here was this one, clearly a teenager. He's like trying to get everybody else to join. There's just this one seal, like, yeah, come on, guys. But and we don't have the shark issue, at least in our little inlet yet.
Well, they are there, so it's really tough to see them up there, but we know from the tagging data, and we've been working closely with the state of Maine since the swimmer was killed. It was the 3-year anniversary yesterday, actually, to monitor tagged sharks there and off the coast of Canada, and that's long been part of their range. A lot of folks don't realize that. But in terms of seals, one of the tricky things with some of these species, with marine mammals in particular, because they were harvested for so long before there was any semblance of fisheries science or conservation science, is nobody knows how many there should be. So we're all used to there not being many seals. And it's so interesting when you talk to people who've lived on the Cape, spent their whole lives here, and they're like, but sharks and seals don't belong here. And a lot of people think it's all due to climate change, but it's really the seals and marine mammals have almost 50 years of protection at this point. And so it's very encouraging that they're coming back, and a lot of whale populations are doing better. Not all of them, the poor right whales, they're still having a time. But a lot of things are responding, which is really positive. But all of these things, marine mammals, they're very similar to white sharks. They live a long time. And there has been this explosion here, but it's important to keep in mind that white sharks, at least as far as we know right now, based on what we're seeing, are the only natural predators of seals in our region. Sharks weren't protected until white sharks weren't listed as a prohibited species until 1997. So the seals have a few decades of protections on the white sharks where they essentially could just grow unchecked. Right. And what we're starting to look at now is, are there signs of seal pupping rates declining? There's not here, but in some regions in Canada, there seems to be the largest gray seal pupping site is off of Sable Island in Canada. And a question we get a lot is, well, how many seals can a white shark eat? How are they going to impact these populations? And that the truth of it is right now we don't know, but it's something we're looking at. We're using different tag technologies and camera types, our tags with cameras in them, different tag types to try to get a better idea of that. We know that sharks aren't always successful. They work really hard to take down a seal, but they inflict injuries. They also stress the seals out. Scientists in other regions have looked at seal hormone levels and responses. And what we're hearing from our colleagues up and down the coast is, as the seal population continues to expand geographically, people are starting to see white sharks queue into them in other regions as well. So I wish I could tell you what kind of time lag it would take, but we really haven't had the chance to see how this predator-prey dynamic could potentially influence that population. And we honestly don't really know what other things might eat seals here because they've just been gone for so long.
Yeah, you used a really important phrase there a minute or two ago. You said, what's the right number? And that's like in the Anthropocene, in this time on Earth, which I've been writing about now for more than 3 decades. The weird challenge for humans is we actually are part of the decision process. It's not like there's just nature just plays itself out. Well, there was that great book by Kaufman. Oh God, it was The World Without Us. There was a book that was a bestseller. And, you know, if we blinked out, all these species would kind of find some new dynamic. And you know, you look back at the history of the Amazon River, where I spent time in decades ago, the turtles used to be so abundant that you couldn't see the water. You know, there were great books written about the lost bounty of the sea. You know, finding out what the right number is now, and you know, it's a value judgment.
But you know, the thing that I never hear people talk about is the real problem is, in terms of species overpopulation, human beings. In my childhood, there were 160 million Americans. There are now 325 million. So every road has twice as many people on it. Every farm has twice as many people drawing from that resource. If Cape Cod is overrun. I have a photograph of Newcomb Hollow Beach in 1967 in August, and there are 7 people in the photograph. Now, to go to Newcomb Hollow Beach, you have to get there at 9 o'clock in the morning, or you're not getting a parking space. Yeah. You're not getting on that beach. It looks like a tailgate party outside a stadium when you get there. It's just, you know, so maybe there's too many seals, maybe there are too many sharks, but there are certainly too many human beings.
Yeah.
And, you know, that causes a problem with the seals that are trying to use the water and the sharks that are trying to use the water. And, you know, why we should have this discussion without also thinking, what about the world's overpopulation? Yeah. It's led to climate change. It's led to all these complications. We don't need town meetings where people are going, how do we have so many sharks? We need town meetings about what are we going to do about overpopulation and finding enough food.
That's a tough town meeting to have.
Yeah. But I asked, oh, sorry, Andrew.
No, you have a question. Go for it. You're a journalist.
I want to ask Megan, I wondered, is there any chance that the solution for this is just to have somebody on every beach with a drone flying up and down the beach? You see these sharks from the water. As you say, the spotter plane finds them for you and Greg. Mm-hmm. Doesn't that just simply eliminate the problem? You'll see the sharks and you just simply, somebody blows the whistle as they do and say, we're now closing the beach for an hour. Why wouldn't that work?
Well, and that's a great question. So that is one thing we're looking at right now is if we were in the Caribbean and the water was always clear and not stirred up, drones would be a great tool. And they are a great tool. We've made some great observations. Some days, like Ivy, when you were out with us, that was a day where it looked like white sharks in the Caribbean.
Yes.
Clear water, not stirred up, not a lot of runoff. But the Cape is such a dynamic spot that we've sat in one place over the course of the day. We've also used, it's like a 12-foot long blimp with a drone camera on it that it can stay up all day. You only have to do one battery change, and drones you're constantly having to land. But we've sat in one spot to document changes in water clarity over the course of the tide. And it changes so much. And so one thing, it's something people are talking about, but we need to know the limitations of the technology, because if you assume you're going to be able to spot every shark when you have a drone up, then if a shark comes in a muddy patch of water and bites somebody, like, you know, people could potentially act more recklessly. So right now, one of the big studies we're focused on this season is doing just that. So we're working with Brian Laguerre from the Center for Coastal Studies, who's also in the film. He's got these series of really high resolution receiver arrays, which are the underwater listening stations for the tags. And he can actually track the movements of an individual through those areas. And so while those are in the water, we're hitting the beaches hard with drones to see if we see every tagged shark that moves through the area. And also to get an idea of potentially how many untagged sharks are moving through, because we have those real-time stations out that are integrated with Sharktivity. But one of our biggest struggles is actually getting people to realize that not every white shark out there is tagged, and to use that information as a proxy for shark activity. Oh, I'm so glad you have this visual. That's perfect.
Yeah, that's one thing I like about doing a visual show and not just audio.
Yeah, that's great. But so the idea is he'll get a record of every tagged shark that swims through one of his gridded arrays when we're out on the beach with the drone. And then we can compare what we saw with what he has and see, were we able to see the shark the whole time? How many sharks were out there that we didn't see? But it is a very valuable surveillance tool. We just need to kind of ground truth
Not
it.
infallible.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to give people a false sense of security that just because a drone's in the air that all sharks are going to be seen. And also sharks are really fast. So you can see a shark coming in from offshore. So, people still need to be aware, not, swimming far offshore, even if there are drones up. But that's one of the things we're working on, like is investigating some of these different kind of shark mitigation technologies. It would be great if there was one that was 100% effective, that could keep sharks and people separate. That would be like the ultimate shark conservation coexistence type of solution, but it's just not out there yet.
And I downloaded the app you have.
Yay!
It's atlanticwhiteshark.org, right?
Yes, and the app is called Sharktivity. It's a free app, and we, when we're out on a research trip, we're always putting in locations where we're seeing sharks. We put all of our historical tagging data in there as well. If you're out and you see a shark, you can report your own sighting. So it's a great way to be a shark citizen scientist. We can't be out every day. We can't cover the whole coastline every day, but it also has those real-time receivers integrated into the app. And so anytime a tagged shark is detected on one of those, it immediately goes to the app. And you can learn more about that shark as well. What its nickname is, if it's a male or female, how big it is. It's been a great outreach tool.
Ivy, there's a scene.
You mean propaganda? Sorry.
Yeah, it's been great shark propaganda, which was a very unique way of hearing an info booth described.
There's a scene in the film, Ivy, where you capture the quandary facing a team of lifeguards, where they're like, should we blow? Do we blow the whistle? And I think that gets to that community tension over, how much do we interfere with our recreational norms and build that gestalt of, hey, there's dangerous things out there versus not. And they did blow the whistle. Could you talk about that moment?
Oh yeah. I mean, of course we really wanted to get a moment like that when we were filming, and we were fortunate enough to, because it really showed. Yeah. I mean, I just, again, kind of hearkening back to this kind of feeling, Jaws, that hangs over all of us in our imaginations. And it's, that feeling of being on the beach, but it really, because of for us, the lifeguards are really important characters. And that was why we followed Susie Blake, the head lifeguard, at Newcomb Hollow Beach. And just to see exactly like what their, this idea that what once was a fun summer job, in some ways, yes, they also had to be quite, able and ready to save people. Right. Now there's this, and as Susie expresses, there's this whole nother layer to it. They have to learn how to administer tourniquets. And so they're, just to show like that how all of them were so nervous and making sure, trying to, and that even if it was a school of fish, just say the hell with it. Like we're worried enough. Let's get everybody out. Wow. I just wanted, it's just a perfect way to show what they're faced with now and what it's like to be on a very crowded beach on the outer Cape and, at the height of the season right now. Wow. But sorry, just to add though, but also at the same time, it was important to us to kind of end that scene. At least to me, it was important to end that scene with people getting used to it. And so we have that part where Susie is walking away and you hear her talking to a beachgoer who says, wow, it's so crazy. They say we can go back in the water. Well, this was just an hour ago. There was a shark here. She says, yeah, this is something we just got to get used to. So it's alarming in the moment. And we definitely ramped it up with a little bit of scary music and, what's going to happen here. But very quickly, everyone just goes back to do their business and of being on the beach and going in the water. And and then the other layer, the final layer, is our continued fascination with sharks. So people are as scared as they are and annoyed, maybe they can't go in the water. They're really excited too.
Yeah. Well, the movie conveys all that stuff. And I guess let's shift a little bit to the broader picture. Again, I've reported on this kind of situation with alligators in Florida, where I followed a guy he's the one who answers the call when there's an alligator in a swimming pool, and I reported
What a
on.
job.
Yeah. Although, and people actually, there've been 2 deaths in one in Florida and one in South Carolina just in the last couple of
Oh yeah, that's
months.
more and more, right? They're coming out of the ponds and the golf courses.
Yep, and those seem to be when people are walking their dogs. The dog is kind of like a little bait or something. And I guess so. This issue, and again, the Sundarbans. I did a conversation with Alan Rabinowitz, a famous tiger biologist who's passed away since, and on his film Tiger, which was about the Sundarbans, India, populous. Talk about populous places with the challenge of predators. And some of this is about what Megan does. How do you educate? How do you foster a conservation ethic in communities? Dealing with this kind of situation is really, it's really hard. Is this your life's work going forward, Megan?
Yeah, I mean, everybody at the Conservancy, and Greg, who's not at the Conservancy, but it's like a very small but very dedicated team. And we all obviously are fascinated with sharks. We love these animals. They're endlessly fascinating. The more we learn about them, the more interesting they honestly become, and the more we realize we are just scraping the surface of what we know about this species. But the woman who founded the Conservancy, Cynthia Wigren, she put it best. One day I was talking to her about this and how there is an emotional toll for conservation biologists working in this space. I honestly did not think when I got in this field, sharks were not doing well. There was a clear mission. It was to help get management measures in place to help shark populations rebuild in the Atlantic waters of the US. And a lot of shark populations around the world still aren't doing well. I did not anticipate, and I did not at all anticipate how tough it would be being on the rebounding phase of things, where now we're seeing all these conservation conflicts. And as Cynthia so eloquently put it one day, she was like, it's much easier to want to conserve large predators when they don't live in your backyard, when you're not interacting with them constantly. Because they are magnificent, they are awe-inspiring, but anytime you've got big predators, whether it's tigers or alligators or sharks, right next to areas where people want to be outside and people are used to recreating without really thinking about it. No matter how skilled these predators are, when there's overlap like that where they're hunting for what they normally eat, sometimes things are going to happen. And as we all learned here in 2018, we had been monitoring the population for a while. We were conducting a number of studies. The Conservancy had been very, very proactive about bringing experts in from all over the world. We had a regional shark working group. We were, trying to get the message out, and we all honestly knew at some point it would probably happen, but none of us were prepared for how emotional it would be. And it was just such a devastating thing. And then to see how it impacted the community, and how, honestly, some folks came in and tried to profit off the situation, sell different types of equipment that are unproven. And that was one of the most tragic things to me, because you see people who who are members of this really small community here, and they're looking for answers, and they feel like their way of life has been taken from them. They just feel powerless. And it was really I was not prepared at all. You can see it on my face in the film, the forum that happened right after Arthur Medici was killed. I thought I was there to provide information, and I quickly realized that that was not my role in that situation, and that this was a way bigger thing than just providing facts about sharks. So it's been a very humbling experience. And honestly, Ivy, your film just makes me realize we're kind of in a shark bubble here. We talk about sharks, we think about them all the time, and we're very proactive on outreach and education, but hearing so many members of the community and how much kind of confusion they still have, even lifeguards and things, it just made me realize how much work there is to be done here, much less, everywhere, as a lot of these predator species are coming back, and we're seeing these conservation success stories in other areas as well.
You talk about the techno solutions or whatever that some people were coming in with. I had been thinking when I was watching the film about South Africa and parts of Australia where they have nets along the beaches, and I thought I'd ask about that. And as I was doing that just a little while ago, I was searching, and there's a biological cost to these shark nets in South Africa. There's a study out on the bycatch and stuff. So, but I didn't know. Is anyone on the Cape talking about nets, or beach protective areas on the beach?
They have been talked about. So a group put together a big kind of comprehensive report of all the technologies that are out there. Shark nets were put in off South Africa and Australia decades ago. There are definitely issues associated with that. They don't cover the whole entirety of the water column. Sharks can swim above it or below it. They also don't only catch sharks, marine mammals, fish species. So Australia has really been kind of at the forefront of this. They've got a lot of government funding to conduct research of this type there. And they've been testing smart drum lines, which they're not nets, they're weighted hooks that they put out off of beaches, and it sends an alert anytime a shark is caught. So they go out, they tag it, and they'll kind of remove it from the area and monitor it. So it doesn't have the lethality rate, and they can select hook sizes and things like that so that they're not, catching marine mammals, or if they catch a sea turtle or something like that, they're able to get out there and release it. So folks are looking at alternative solutions, but in some of those regions, those programs have been in place for decades. And once you start doing something like that, it's really hard to stop. Shark bites are a very low probability event overall. So, it's one of those things that's really hard to quantify the effectiveness of those types of things. But there have been studies conducted in Hawaii and other regions where they had big shark culling programs that found that it made no difference in incidence rates, just because shark bites in general are such a low probability event. But there is an area in South Africa where they have an exclusion net where they can put it across a very small bay, and it covers the entire water column. They remove it every night after the lifeguards go home. And that one's had some success. The Outer Cape is like such a dynamic, wavy environment. It just destroys stuff. It destroys equipment that's made for the ocean.
Yeah, not for a cove like in Maine, you could definitely do that because of all the little.
I mean, we looked into this too when we were, just when we were talking to like kind of these citizen activist groups. You see some of them in the film, and that they had been coming up with a lot of these ideas. And what we learned too is what Megan's touching on is how dynamic the Outer Cape is. I mean, you can it could be week to week that the shoals are shifting, and if you're a boater on the Cape, you better know what you're doing. There's not, just get in and out of the harbors, and it's changing so much on the Outer Cape. So I don't know how you would ever do that. How you would have nets and things.
It's a tough area. The tidal currents, when you talk to people who scuba dive out here, usually there's only slack tide, a small chunk of the tide that you can dive. And we've seen that in the camera tags that we've been putting on sharks, is that sometimes they struggle. Sometimes the current's buffeting them about. So if you think of trying to put something in the water and getting it to stay in place, it's a tough environment out here.
So let's maybe a last round. Alec, you've covered complexity in various contexts, and we all think about solutions. For me, global warming, everyone talks way too much about fixing the problem as if it's that kind of situation. It's much bigger. What comes to mind, again, because you spend time there, if you could see a successful picture 10 years from now, what might that look like? And then Ivy, I'd like to get some last thoughts from you.
It's a very interesting question. I mean, I guess I would say what's successful: plenty of sharks, plenty of seals, and no shark bites. I mean, the incidence of shark bites is a very complex question itself, because if you were on the beach that day when Arthur Medici was killed, your chance of being bitten by a shark was very high. If you say how many people are bitten by sharks and how many Americans are there, it's very unlikely. It really depends statistically on what your collection of people are. But I think that one of the reasons that sharks are so appealing, this came up a little earlier, is they are fantastic metaphors for the unconscious life. The greatest symbol for the unconscious is the ocean. And the sharks roam through the ocean like all the sort of ungovernable desires and impulses and responses that people have psychically. And it's appealing to know that there is a creature like this that is going where it wants, when it wants, on its own terms, but isn't killing you. Just as it is psychically, the problem is it's wonderful to know that your imagination will roam here and there and come up with these wonderful insights, so long as it doesn't make you crazy. But I don't program, for me, I don't know how Megan and Ivy feel, but that would limit the number of sharks, or it was interesting to note that not many years ago, 5 maybe, both Chatham and Truro had big grinning sharks on their beach stickers. It was thought, this is going to be, just a wonderful thing. Yeah. We're going to have tons of tourists.
Yeah.
Chatham really had it as they all but had a cute little shark, a baby shark figure. And Truro, like I say, on their beach stickers had a big grinning shark. And then Arthur Medici was killed, and it wasn't suddenly the same question. But I would like for there to be just the way people have to know, if you go to Alaska and you walk through the woods, it sounds like a basketball game is taking place, because everybody's got a whistle and they're blowing their whistle to do, and I'd like to think that people would be sufficiently knowledgeable about the dangers of, even if fleeting or unpredictable, of a wild, magnificent population of animals, that they would know how to respect them and stay clear of them. Get out of the water when the lifeguard says there's as little as I like being told to get out of the water, it's still it's the new thing. I would like it to be a circumstance of abundance that is respectfully approaced.
That sounds hopeful. Let's see if we can get there.
Hopefully.
So Ivy, again, we could do a whole different show on the process of making the film, and not just the process of making it, but keeping it nuanced and keeping it complex. And HBO, I still don't understand what Max is, but HBO documentaries has a great record of allowing some of that. So again, let's get to your last hope first, but do you have something to say about that? How do you make films that are complex in a world that's so focused on the simple?
I mean, I just let people talk, and I listen to them, and I don't come in with an agenda. I really don't. I actually try to work against my own preconceived notions. We all have them. I do have my own, I want, people to, as Alec is saying, to have a healthy respect for the ocean and appreciate and not feel that it is our swimming pool and that we somehow have ownership over it. That is my point of view. And that I think it does permeate the film overall. But in terms of getting to that point, I find it's much more interesting for me as a filmmaker to spend a lot of time with people if I'm not going in there thinking, oh, this is what I want that person to say. I really love the exploration process of filmmaking, and if I carry it through the edit, then I am letting people express themselves, and I'm trying to show people they're coming from very different points of view, and that we all kind of live in our little bubble. And that's why it was important for someone like John Cartoonist to show that a lot of this, his feelings are motivated by this kind of tight family unit that he has, and feeling maybe a little patriarchal, whatever, but for his protective of his daughters and this way of life. And so I want people to empathize with everyone, so that we can actually have a conversation. So for me, it's really about, it's just about listening to people and presenting and letting them tell their own stories as best. I try to get out of their way and give them the best shot that I see, of the footage that I get from them, that will allow audiences into their lives and care about what they have to say.
That's great. Well, I really thank you all for taking the time to be on my little Sustain What webcast. Again, that question about how much is enough is something I think about all the time. Sustain What is called Sustain What because I brattle against simple words like sustainability, and I start by asking questions. Sustain what? How? For whom? And the whom can include the sharks, and that's sort of the way we work here. And thanks again, Megan Winton. Congratulations on the new paper and on your path.
Thanks so much.
PhD, and the important work you do at the interface of biology and the part of biology called human beings. And Alec Wilkinson for your decades of journalism exploring this kind of issue. I won't ask you what's next on your list, but we can get in touch about that too. And anyone?
I was
Sorry.
just going to say, Alec, he had a book out recently.
Let's tell the book. What is it?
Mathematics.
That's the title?
Divine Language. Just came out in paperback last week.
Ooh.
You're amazing. Oh my God.
I'm going to get it.
Yeah. Amazing. Good for you. Someday I'm getting back into book writing. So someday soon, actually.
A pleasant occupation.
Thanks again. This is the Sustain What webcast. Again, today's show is about Ivy Meeropol's movie After the Bite and the work of Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, Megan Winton, and the writing of Alec Wilkinson. If you've been watching here, this is an unusual time for my show. Share the link you've been watching on with others. Go to revkin.substack.com and you can read a little background on the film and go into this weekend thinking about the environment around you and how to build a more enduring relationship between people and the other stuff around us, and between people and each other as well. Thanks again, and good luck with the rest of your promotional efforts on the film. I'll be pushing it hard.
Thank you so much.
Great film, Ivy. A real accomplishment.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It is.
Couldn't do it without you